Well, hello, mathematicians. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about problem solving, which is my very favorite thing to do once we have all the nuts and bolts in place like we do. And I have been teaching you a method for problem solving called the startup scheme. This was developed by a professor in Singapore named Dr. Hong in 2012. If you do an internet search for his name and the startup scheme, you will find the foundations for this. It's been adapted for students in the US, but that is where the foundation is. Well, we're going to get started right away. We're in course 1 of Math and Focus in textbook A. And on page 96 is this problem. And a paper artist is using 18 paper rectangles for a collage, and he uses 6 of them for the border of the artwork. That's this place around the edge. And then he is going to cut the remaining paper rectangles into equal strips, each being 1/4 of a paper rectangle. So how many strips of paper does he cut? Well, using the startup scheme, we need to figure out at the very beginning what it is that we know, what is given to us in the problem for our use. And the very first thing that we see is that we have this artist using 18 paper rectangles. But 6 of them are used for the border of the artwork, and he is only going to use the remaining rectangles in order to make paper strips. And these are going to be equal strips. Each of them is going to be 1/4 of a paper rectangle. So that brings us to what we're going to find, and that is how many strips of paper the artist cuts. So we write that sentence with a blank where the answer will go. The artist cut so many paper strips. Well, now it's time for us to get started in our problem solving, trying to figure out and make sense of what it is that we know in order to find how many paper strips that there are from the remaining paper. So how many papers are left after he uses 6? Well, he starts with 18, uses 6, and that leaves us with 12 pieces of paper, right? And from there, we have to figure out how many quarter-size strips are in the papers that are left. Now, if you want to, you can think about this visually. Each paper is going to be cut into 4 pieces, right? And one of these pieces is a quarter, right? So that there are 4 of these quarters in every single rectangular piece of paper. This being 1 page, right? And so you see that with 12 pages left and each page being cut into 4 pieces, that is going to give the artist 48 paper strips. And you've come to the conclusion of your problem. However, what happens if the numbers are really kind of scary and you can't easily see in your mind what is a quarter? What does a quarter look like? Well, we could do it a different way. We could say there are 12 papers and we're asking ourselves, how many quarters are in 12? Well, in order to divide by fractions, you already know that you're going to multiply by a reciprocal. All right, so you're going to use an inverse operation with an inverted fraction, okay? And as you multiply across numerator and denominator, you're going to get 48 paper strips. All right, so either way you do it, works out just fine. Let's try another one. Sophie buys a roll of string that's 20 meters long. She uses 3 meters of string to tie a parcel, then cuts the remaining string into equal pieces, each piece 1/2 meter long. How many pieces does Sophie cut? Well, the first thing we're going to do is figure out what's given to us in this problem. What do we know? We know she starts out with 20 meters, but uses 3 of those meters. So then she has some leftover, and of that leftover, that is going to be cut in 1/2 meter strips. So that brings us to what we need to find, which is this sentence with a blank where the answer will go. Sophie cut so many half-meter strings. So the first thing we need to do is to figure out how many meters are left after she uses 3. We're still actually helping ourselves find what we know, find information here. So we know that she started out with 20 meters of string, and she used 3 meters of string, and that left her with 17 meters of string. And we know that each of those 17 meters is going to be cut in half meters. So here's a meter of string. And for each meter, there are 2 pieces. So if she has 17 meters and they're each cut in 2, that's a total of 34 half-meter pieces. And that's our answer. As before, if these numbers were harder to deal with, we could always ask this same question a little differently. And the question would be, how many half meters are in 17? And in order to do that division with a fraction, we're going to simply take the 17 and multiply by the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2/1. And we're always going to multiply across, giving us 34/1 in this case, or 34 pieces of string that are each a half-meter long. This brings us to our last type of problem, which is a multi-step problem. A school district buys 96 packages of highlighters. 3/8 of the packages go to the English department and the rest to the math department. The math department gives 2/3 of each package to each math teacher working in the school district. How many math teachers will receive highlighters? Well, I want you to go ahead and try this one on your own without any help and see if you can figure out, using the startup scheme, how to solve this particular problem. So pause the video, come back to me. All right. Well, first of all, we're going to find out what we know. We know that we start with 96 packages of highlighters. 3/8 of those are going away to the English department, and we're going to work with the rest, which are staying in the math department. And 2/3 of each package is going to be given to each math teacher in the district. So then that brings us to what we need to find, which is how many math teachers will get highlighters. Alrighty, here is my picture that I used to help explain to myself what was going on in the problem. I know there are 96 packages, and I cut these up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. And the reason I did that is because 3/8 of those 96 packages are going to the English department. And that means a certain number of eighths are staying with the math department. And I know that there are 8 eighths in one whole and 3 eighths were used, and that leaves me with 5 eighths. So then if I'm going to try and figure out how many packages the math department got, I want to know what is 5 eighths of 96. Okay, and remember, I've taught you before that of means multiplication. So there's 1 8 in 8, and there are 12 eighths in 96. And now I'm going to multiply across. 5 times 12 gives me 60. And 8 times 1, or I'm sorry, 1 times 1 is 1. So there are 60 packages given to the math department. All right, and let's just double check. This was 3 eighths, this was 5 eighths, and this was 60. So if I'm starting with 96 and I take away the 60, there should be 36 left. Well, let's double check that. So the question was, how many highlighters did the math department get? There's another way to actually work this. And this is to say, you know what? Here we have 96 packages and there are 8 units. So I'm going to divide 96 by 8 and I'm going to get 12. So if I have 12 in each unit, then I should have 36 here and 60 here. And 36 and 60 gives me 96. So that checks out. Either way I do it, it checks out. Which brings me to my next question is, how many 2/3 are in the number of highlighters the math department received? Well, the math department received 60, and so we're asking how many 2/3 are in 60, right? So let's say this is a 2/3, right? Right here. How many are in 60? And there's a simple way to do that you were taught. That means that we're going to take our division of fractions. We're going to use an inverse operation of multiplication with an inverted fraction, which in this case is 3/2. We go from 2/3 to 3/2. And we can, of course, simplify this. There's 1, 2, and 2, and there are 32s in 60. And now we multiply across. 30 times 3 is 90, and 1 times 1 is 1. So there are 90 2/3 in 60, and that means that 90 math teachers got highlighters. So there is another way to think about this for yourself. If you think about one package, right? And we asked ourselves how many 2/3 are in one. Okay? Here is 1 2/3. And here is 1/3. Okay, and 1/3 happens to be half a 2/3, right? So there are 1.5 2/3 in one, but we have 60. So 1.5 times 60, 160 is 60, and half of 60 is 30. So 1.5 60s is 90. Either way we do it, it checks out. Very good. Let's go on to the last problem we have today. Andrea buys 75 cups of cranberry apple juice for a party. She uses 2/5 of the juice to make punch, and then uses the remaining juice to pour single servings that are 5/6 of a cup each. How many single servings does Andrea pour? Well, what do we know? We know she starts with 75 cups, but uses 2/5 of that. And then there's some juice remaining, which she is going to split into 5/6 cup servings. And that brings us to what we need to find. And we're going to go ahead and write a sentence with a blank where the answer will go. Andrea pours so many single servings. Well, let's draw a picture to explain this to ourselves. We have a whole divided into 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. And this whole is 75 cups of cranberry apple juice, right? 2/5 of that is punch, and that leaves the 3/5 for single servings of juice. So we need to find out how many 5/6 are in this 3/5 that's left. Okay, so step 1 is going to be how many cups are in the remaining juice. And there are a few ways to do that. The first way to do that is to say, you know what is 3/5 of 75? Okay. And we know that 5 goes into 75 15 times. So 3 times 15 gives us 45. So we're saying that this is 45 cups. And if this is 45 cups of single serving, then this must be 30. Okay, and let's see if that checks out. We're going to try it a different way. We're going to say 75 cups divided into 5 units gives us 15 cups per unit. And 2/5 should be 30. 15 plus 15 is indeed 30. And 3/5 should be 45. And we know that 15 times 3 is in fact 45. So that checks out either way. We've got it checked out. So we have 45 cups of juice for single serving. And that brings us to step 2, which is how many 5-6 cup servings are in the remaining juice. If we have 45 and we're asking how many 5/6 are in 45, well, you know how to divide by fractions. You take the 45 and you're going to multiply, use the inverse operation with an inverted fraction. You're going to multiply by 6/5. And there's 1 5 and 5, and there are 9 5s in 45. 9 times 6 is 54. And there are 54 single servings of juice that Andrea pours. Well, that's all I got for you. I hope you have a great day.